Let's go straight into our business spotlight section. So first up, we have Philip Evangelou, so managing partner of OpenLegal, a commercial law firm specializing in mergers and acquisitions and employment law. Now, traditional large law firms aren't always the best fit for emerging businesses, and I believe this is one of the reasons Philip founded OpenLegal to provide flexible legal offerings. So he'll tell you more about that. But he's got over 15 years of experience in the industry, and today has offered to share some updates on legislations that I believe potentially affect all of us. So with that, I will hand over to Philip.
Thanks, Kavita. It's a pleasure to be here today to present on this important topic. I'll just go to the right page. So I'm talking about the topic of empowering workplace well-being. So a hot topic over the last 12 months has been all about making sure that employees have a safe workplace. And the different items on the agenda are the new laws that are coming into play. Some of them are already in place, but the first one that's actually coming into play next month is the right to disconnect. The duty on employees to prevent discrimination and harassment is already in force. It came into force sort of the last 24 months. And the recent one that's come into force is the duty on employees to minimize psychosocial risks in the workplace. And then we'll finish up with a quiz. So apologies if I'm going to rush through this, but I know I've only got 8 minutes. So on the right to disconnect, this is basically enforceable from the 26th of August. I think it's 2024, not 2025. So that's an error there. But basically from next month, employees can refuse to monitor, read, or respond to work-related contact outside of their usual working hours if it's deemed unreasonable. So just say you have an employee that has finished work and there's something that's come up that you want them to respond to. It's actually now technically you can't force them to respond or can't expect them to respond if it's outside the usual hours, obviously unless it's a life or death emergency that would be reasonable for them to respond. But if it's non-urgent and it's not critical, and then you're not also paying them for that time, they have the right not to respond to your contact. And you can't actually discipline them or treat them any differently adversely if they choose to do that. So what's important to do now is actually review and see if you have policies in place about contact outside of work hours and actually manage expectations throughout your organization. So these are the type of things you need to consider, is actually look at, your policies, provide training on potentially mechanisms in place to facilitate what happens if you do need to contact an employee outside of the usual hours, and what would be acceptable for the employee as well. So if you do it in consultation, then you're sort of bypassing this because you've got their consent. And the next thing that we want to discuss is a case study. So in this one, Elsie's on sick leave from work, and over the past 4 days, she's sick, and Michelle, her supervisor, makes multiple phone calls to her private mobile and to her personal email. And one of the contacts includes threatening to call the police for a welfare check. So in this scenario, if it was to go to the Fair Work Commission or to court, they're likely to find that Michelle's persistent contact during her sick leave was unreasonable, and that they couldn't discipline Elsie for not responding to her employer. Now we'll move on to the next topic, which is duty on employees to prevent harassment and also discrimination in the workplace. So effectively what this duty is, it's proactive. So you can't, in the old days prior to this legislation coming in, you could be reactive when there was discrimination or harassment. Now the duty is on the employer to take proactive steps to prevent any discrimination or harassment taking place in their workplace. So this is what summarizes or constitutes harassment and discrimination. So on the left-hand side, these items here amount to discrimination or harassment. And on the right-hand side, these things do not amount to discrimination or harassment. So educating, especially management and leaders in your organizations or in your clients' organizations about what actually constitutes discrimination and harassment is become more and more important over the last couple of years. But also educating them on what isn't harassment and discrimination, so they still have the confidence to provide constructive feedback in a emotionally intelligent way. And one example could be Telstra, which is a huge organization. They have an inclusive leadership program, which is mandatory, which teaches them about the Respect at Work legislation, which came into force about 18 months ago, which essentially is giving people respect at work so that they don't feel like they're treated any differently because of their gender, their race, their religion, or their sexual orientation and things around that. So as a result of that, Telstra's been awarded and received a workplace equality index where it consistently ranks high for its commitment to gender equity and LGBTQI plus inclusion. And segueing on to that is diversity, equity, inclusion. So did you all know that Boston Consulting Group did a study and found that diverse management teams actually generated 19% more revenue from innovation than their less diverse counterparts? So there's actually studies to prove that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just a buzzword, it's actually better for corporations for their bottom dollar, or for their bottom line, I should say. So likewise, the Harvard Business Review also shed some light on diverse teams having a better understanding of the client's needs, because you're getting diverse perspectives on what potential problems clients might have with a service or a product. And it also improves employee retention and engagement, and you end up attracting top talent if you're perceived in the marketplace as being a diversity, equity, and inclusion champion, and you provide a sense of belonging to your team. So minimizing psychosocial risk. So in New South Wales, under the Workplace Health and Safety Act, they introduced a duty on employers to minimize or even prevent psychosocial risks in the workplace. So this is effectively a new duty which has exposed, the workers' compensation insurers to a whole other raft of potential claims, which is basically you need to ensure in terms of work design, management, social context, if there's anything that could lead to psychological or social harm. Social harm includes things like being excluded from a group or a team, which then leads on to work stress, bullying, or a lack of support being suffered by the employee. And common psychological risks are excessive workloads, long hours, discrimination, harassment, lack of support. All these can amount to potential psychosocial risks in the workplace. And how do you minimize them? So it involves conducting regular risk assessments, having strong, emotionally intelligent communication, providing supervisor support, so to your leadership teams, promoting work-life balance, providing stress management training, and ensuring realistic workloads and clear job roles and expectations.
Philip, sorry to interrupt. I can see Alicia's got her hand raised. Alicia, is
Sure,
that because you have a question for Philip?
sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, what does it mean to be critical, or what the definition of critical is when the government is defining this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess if someone's being unnecessarily critical to an employee, in that the feedback is not constructive in the sense that it's not giving them an opportunity to improve, and it's basically criticizing them in a way that makes them feel like they're not good at their job, it comes across more along the lines of the way it's communicated rather than in a sense that you're critiquing an employee. So there's nothing stopping an employer from legitimately putting someone on a performance improvement plan, but it needs to be done diplomatically and in an emotionally intelligent way. So it's not just about critiquing in the sense of providing criticism. It's in the sense of, is that criticism actually constructive and aimed at helping that employee improve their performance? Or is it delivered in a way which makes that employee feel worthless and demotivated? So you can have two employers communicating the same feedback, but if one is doing it in a not so nice way, it will definitely most likely come across as a potential psychosocial adverse impact on the employee, which then opens up a can of worms in a potential work cover claim. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Thanks for the question as well. So Philip, we're at time.
Yeah.
But what I will be doing is happy to send Philip's slides across to everyone. The recording is going to be on YouTube very shortly. It'll be sent around to everyone. And of course, Philip's details are all on BackBone. So feel free to reach out to him and have a more in-depth conversation about this, because it's a very important piece of legislation. And thank you again, Philip.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.